And it's live.
Excellent.
Hi, this is Brie Sheldon for the Horror in RPGs panel for ConTessa Online, and I'm here today with Epidiah and Rachel, who are our horror experts. I am Brie Sheldon, and I am a game designer, developer, editor, writer, and I am a fan of horror, but still learning the ropes. So I'm hoping that these two can enlighten me. Epi, if you want to go first.
Sure. I'm Epidiah Ravachol. I'm on this panel probably because of Dread, the horror role-playing game that uses Jenga, which I published with some friends a decade ago. So it's 10 years old this year.
Nice.
And yeah, I've done some other games and things since.
And I am Rachel E.S. Walton, and I guess I'm here because I like talking about horror and games, and I'm working on a game called The Long Orbit, which is a Monster Hearts hack that does like space isolation horror. So I'm talking a bit about that.
Awesome. You're so modest, the two of you. Like, I did things. I have a couple of questions here, and I'm hoping we will get some questions from the audience if anyone's actually paying attention. I'm going to start us off with a fun question, I'm hoping. What is your favorite horror movie?
Ooh.
Whoever wants to go first may go.
I know my answer right off the top of my head.
Go for it.
Okay. It is hands down the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original. And partly because I've never been more terrified watching a film than I was watching that film. It stresses me out to think about. Like, I've seen it now maybe 3 times. I don't like. I haven't watched it a whole lot because every time it's always a big production for me. I have to psych myself up. And oh my god, the last time I saw it, I was actually watching with Vincent Baker, and when it was done, I had to drive home, and at the time I was living in a mountain, out away from all of civilization, and we're start the drive out, and the gas light in the car comes on, and I was like, we're turning the hell around and we're going back to civilization because I am not going to get, Massachusetts Chainsaw Massacre tonight. So, but yeah, that one is my absolute favorite.
That's awesome. Can I ask, when did you first see it? How old were you?
As an adult, that's like a movie that loomed very large in my childhood. I didn't get to see horror films until, I don't remember when. I remember my first horror film, which was Nightmare on Elm Street, the original Nightmare on Elm Street. But that one I saw it on video, like on VHS. But when I was younger, they talked about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like, I hear from the older kids about it, or rumors about how, because it was this great sort of marketing where they say based on a true story, and so back then, before you could really research anything like you can now with the internet, that was a topic of conversation so much. I mean, we spent so much time trying to figure out if it was true or not, and just from what we heard from it, we had never seen it. We hadn't even seen TV commercials. We've heard radio spots for it that terrified the living poop out of me. I don't know if we can swear. I'm trying to keep it on.
I think it'll be okay.
Okay, all right. But yeah, so it loomed very large in my life long before I got to see it, but I didn't see it until I was in my 30s, I think. So.
That's awesome. For me, I think it's probably gonna have to be Alien or Aliens. They're both kind of conjoined in my head. Um, but they were so I'm generally not that affected by horror, but because they kind of hit at this right time in my childhood development, like they're just embedded as like something really special in my mind. Um, like I think it was probably when Aliens was coming out, so there was more advertising for it. Um, I think the first encounter I had with it was at Disney World. Um, I think I was 8 years old, and they had back when MGM Studios was like a thing. They had this ride that you could go on. It's like a little boat that would take you through like this movie land, where you would see scenes like wax figure scenes of different films that MGM and similar studios had produced, and they had this thing for Alien, and you could see it coming, and it was terrifying because you saw like Ripley was this animatronic Ripley was like standing at this corner. You could see the sweat beads on her face, and she's like looking around the corner with her gun up, like ready for something. And you can see like every now and then out of the ceiling comes this alien right over your little boat that you're going through, and it's like, please, please don't come out when our boat is underneath. And it was so great. And then later on the same trip, they had the mother alien from Aliens, and the, oh wow, losing words, but that metal fighting robot thing, right?
Oh yeah, the load
Um,
lifter or whatever.
Lifter, yeah, yeah. So you could kind of see it up close, like what that looked like, and it just created this combination of cool and just terror in my mind. And then when I finally saw them, like just experiencing that like anticipation was just the best. And I think probably I think it was Alien Resurrection in the theater, but just I remember going into the theater with that kind of quivery feeling of like, oh my gosh, this is like gonna be in my face and it's scary, and it's just so great.
Nice. That's awesome.
I,
Um,
I I remember the first time I saw Alien. That was another one that, like, when I first saw it, I saw it alone on a weekend that, like, this was when I was younger. My parents were away from the house, and just uh, absolutely, like, couldn't understand why I put myself through that. I loved the movie. I absolutely loved the movie, but it was just so tense, and I was just, that the whole joke about how you pay for the whole seat, but you just use the edge. That was precisely what that was like throughout that whole movie for me. I remember getting done with it feeling like I had been one giant tensed up ball of. Ooh, I think we might have lost Rachel.
possibly. I will try and invite her back in.
She didn't like me talking about Alien.
uh, Fun and kind of shameful fact. I actually didn't see Alien until last year.
Oh, that's great.
And I am so jaded that
Right.
it didn't really scare me. But then I started playing Alien Isolation, and like I'm afraid to pick up the game again because I saw the monster for the first time and like screamed out loud. I'm a
It's
giant coward.
it's interesting our relationship with movies and monsters. One of the examples that I like to use is I've got this book from the 80s, mid 80s. I don't remember what year it was published, but it's an anthology of Walking Dead fiction, right? Like it's an anthology of reanimated zombie whatever. And the introduction. Oh, there's Rachel. Hello.
Okay.
But the introduction to the book is this is a just to bring Rachel. It's a book I have from like the 80s. It's an anthology of zombie fiction, and in the introduction, they make this sort of not an apology, but like a statement about how it should be okay for people to enjoy zombie fiction. Like, it was in the 80s that like you were a deviant for enjoying it, and like now you're it's a little odd that you don't buy zombie stuffed, toys for your children. If that's, and like we keep doing that with our horror, is that it just becomes it starts as a monster and slowly becomes a stuffed animal by the end of your own personal lifetime, which I think makes a lot of the early stuff sometimes not hit with the impact that it originally did. Although some of the early stuff is in fact more like just because you didn't expect it to be the way it was, or it's the first that did this sort of thing and it hits you kind of hard. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I have 3 top movies. Not necessarily my favorites, but the ones that scare me the most. And that is Buckets of Blood, Carrie, and It. Buckets of Blood I watched about 10 minutes of and shut off because it's a dread film. It's not a horror film. And it makes you feel kind of sick to your stomach and twisted, and you're probably going to pass out if you hold your breath much longer. And so I stopped watching it, and I still can't even put it on the screen because it scares me so much. And It and Carrie I saw whenever I was 7 in a double feature for Stephen King films. And I still haven't quite recovered. And that's been 20 years. And great movies, but scare the hell out of me. I mean, they were very effective at what they did. So those are my top 3.
I think Jaws is the one that still sticks with me. I'm terrified of water critters.
Yeah.
Oof.
We worked through some of our trauma of that movie because the house I grew up in had this old in-ground pool, so we would torture each other by reenacting Jaws in it.
That's great.
I was afraid of the toilet for 6 months after seeing that movie for the first time.
Oh man.
So how did you guys get into horror? Like, were you fans your whole life, or is it something that grew on you, or what's your motivation for the interest?
Good question.
Yeah, I don't know. I have I think just it's associated with a bit of a thrill from as long as I can remember. I had an aunt that she was always a little more permissive, so when we would go to her house, we got to see stuff that my parents would never allow us to see. And it kind of became this exciting dare. Like, we would see this stuff and it would be terrifying, and some of it would kind of settle into our minds and just, I don't know, in unpleasant ways, but in other ways it was exciting to be able to be like, yes, I conquered that. There's like this bit of like machismo and like I saw it, or I saw the Thing, and I'm okay. So I don't know. It kind of always created a bit of swagger in my mind that was enjoyable. But I've never been like super into horror. Like there's a lot that I haven't seen. I like it more as a part of other stories rather than like horror genre. But that's my preference.
Yeah, I think like is an interesting word for horror, right?
Yeah.
As a kid, I would deliberately scare myself. I would spend time in the basement in the dark, or going out at night, or just like how that when you're inside and the light's on inside and you're looking at a window and it's nighttime, you can't see what's outside that window, and I would just spend time just staring at that, imagining what would come up to that window that would just freak my shit, like what. And I don't think I did that because I particularly enjoyed it. It's just my brain kept going there and I kept doing it. It's interesting. I just recently found out, my parents were telling me about when I was younger, they would take we went on some family camping trips with like a bunch of other families that we knew, that had kids all about the same age, and they would go out and they would get like several lodges in the woods somewhere, and they told me that I used to just scare the shit out of all the other kids, telling them like stories about serial killers in the woods. I don't recall any of this, and I think I remember people doing that to me at some point. So I think that for a long time I just thought that's how it was. This is what being an adult is. I'm the older kid. We just scare the shit out of you. We tell you that you're gonna die tonight. Enjoy, that kind of thing. But yeah, and that definitely carried on into adulthood. It took me a while to really consciously watch a horror film. Like I said, Nightmare on Elm Street was the first one. I think I probably saw other ones before that, like as a kid, that I wasn't supposed to see. Like they were on television, or there's one about a house killing some people that I only vaguely recall bits of it. But yeah, I just really enjoyed scaring myself. And then as an adult, as an older teenager, I remember playing Chill, the horror. Mayfair was publishing it at the time, so this would be, I guess, in the 90s, which is kind of it's a horror system that is like uses percentile to figure things out, and I kind of had the impression of it being like there was Call of Cthulhu, and then there was Chill, and then there was a few others out at the time, but I really liked the way Chill looked, and I ran it for some friends of mine, and we were in my basement when we did it, and I had done all these things to like affect the atmosphere. We had nothing but red light, and all the light came up from below, and we played late at night, and we got done with that session, and my friends like sprinted to their cars. Like they didn't dilly-dally near the house. As soon as that door was open, they ran until they were in the safety of their cars. And witnessing that really changed like how I viewed the role-playing hobby and horror and everything together. Like it was awesome to like instill such a primal emotion into people and get them going.
Nice. That's very cool. That actually kind of leads us into our next question.
Okay.
Which is, how do you bring horror to the table when you're running a game?
I think that depends on the game a little bit. But for me, I don't find just outright like gore and like trying to be scary isn't scary. So I try to make sure if the game is going to have a horror theme, to make sure it's grounded in real gritty detail, just characters that are relatable and relate to each other in interesting ways, and a setting that is described with like sensory detail, making sure that you ground it in something that your mind can kind of latch onto, so you really settle into the setting and the space and the other characters. If you have like this nice foundation of that, it's easier once you start introducing creepy things or gross things or whatever kind of horror you're doing. It's easier for that to have more of an impact if it's contrasted with normal life stuff.
Yeah, I think the contrast is really where I see the best hits at the table, right? I'm going to give away my DreadCon scenario here. I'm going to give away the surprise. I have a little like it takes about 45 minutes to an hour to run. So it's like a really quick scenario that I do at cons when people are like, hey, do you have time to run a Dread demo? And because it behooves me to get it done as fast as I can so I can. But anyways, the scenario is just a zombie apocalypse thing because I'm in the middle of a convention and I don't have any control over the environment. So I'm not going for, the spooky music. I can't put on spooky music or any of that stuff. So I'm saying, okay, this is zombie apocalypse. We're so many people around you right now that you can definitely feel that. And in this particular scenario, I have the truck that they're in. It's like a couple weeks after the zombie apocalypse, and the truck they're in breaks down outside of a farmhouse somewhere, and they go to investigate the farmhouse. And the thing that I love doing in this scenario is that we start off with like, okay, then there's some overgrown corn that starts moving the wrong way, and everyone's like, oh yeah, okay, so there's zombies there, and blah blah blah. And then the first time they get into any of the buildings, either one of the barns or the house itself, when they open it up, on the walls are all of these zombies that are chained up or nailed up or duct taped up. Obviously, somebody has put these zombies up there, or these, and then eventually they find out that there's some people that are alive that are also up on that thing, and it's just this, I'm setting them up for a regular zombie thing, and I'm like, no, this is secret doomsday cult in here. Good luck, enjoy. And it's great. I like the set up one expectation and then hit them with something else. But I think like the best moments are the ones when it's just a tiny little detail that's not. It's not. It doesn't. I don't mind gore at all, but like it's not the gore that gets you. It's when they can describe something, right? Like you can describe all the gore in the world you want, but if you also, instead of doing that, describe them opening a room and finding a single tooth in the middle of the room, like a human tooth lying on it, then you're like, oh, let's go.
Yes.
It's always, just enough out of place kind of thing to.
Cool. I have a couple of questions from the audience.
Actually. Oh, excellent.
Which I'm pretty excited about. I'm going to kind of pick and choose from these because some of them have like 6 questions in them. So the first one we will have up is from Tara. She has like 3 or 4 questions in here, but the one that I want to focus on, the 2 that I want to focus on, are how you set up your space to run a horror game, and what are some good ways to practice impromptu atmospheric speech.
What was that second part again?
What are some good ways to practice impromptu atmospheric speech?
Huh.
Yeah, that one really challenged me, which is why I'm asking you.
Well, I mean, as far as setting up space goes, well, I address that. Like, I've enjoyed, like, definitely, like, using. I mean, there's standards. Like, you can just dim the lighting, or you can have scary music on. There's a music's hard to control. It's not a thing that. It's a thing that always feels like it's like a great idea for role-playing games, but although they're like, I think people are getting better at doing that sort of thing. But yeah, I think generally speaking, just a place where I can, don't have to be shouting over a crowd, or and I think I generally prefer playing horror games at night. I don't think that that's an absolute necessity or anything like that, but I don't feel like I'm blowing any minds with what I'm saying here, though. But I don't know if Rachel has anything to add there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't tend to respond to gimmicky stuff, so I don't tend to bring that to my table. I think music can be okay, but to me, sometimes I find it distracting, or if I'm having to control music,
yeah.
I don't like having to mess around with that. Actually, one of the best, settings I ever had for running the long orbit, which is like it's set on a spaceship, was we were in a room at a convention space, and the air conditioning was the unit was messed up, so it gave out this kind of like a noisy, whooshy kind of sound that kind of gave it a spaceship feel. But generally, it's not something that I spend much time thinking about. Quiet is nice if you can have quiet, but that's not always an option at a convention space. So you have to do what you can to focus in on what's happening. Beyond that, like probably my favorite setting was it was a game of Dread. It was the werewolf. I think it's a werewolf one or something. It's like they're it's a camping scenario, and we played it on a camping trip. So we were outside in the dark, and we had lit by a lantern, and we were kind of playing this Dread game about a camping trip or a hiking trip. So it was very fun and atmospheric that way. But generally, I don't have like a lot of special effects.
I've seen some really brilliant things that people have done for, because I mean obviously when people do things for Dread it comes to my attention, but like I've seen people do like horror scenarios set in space where they give everyone a like a flashlight, like a like one of these tube flashlights, like the kind you'd expect to see in Alien or Aliens or whatever, and then that's the only thing they have to use to see by when they go and pull. And yeah, like there's seeing some people's setups, like if you do like a search for it on actually I'm not sure if that would work anymore, but just like going to like look for a Tumblr or something like that, there's a lot of fun things that people like to do to make that happen. There's a new game coming out called 10 Candles, which is a like a end of the world survival horror kind of thing, where you actually have 10 lit candles at the table, and after you do each scene you blow out one of the candles, and when you get to the end of it all of the light is extinguished from the world.
So great.
Right? Yeah, it's a great thematic playthrough on that. And Candlelight's a lot of fun. I always caution people when they do it with Dread, though, because you don't want things falling about.
Virus back.
Yeah. And for that second question, the impromptu atmospheric speech, there's two bits of advice I can offer for that, and one is that it's okay to pause. Like it's okay to just think about things, and just a lot of times people think, there's a spotlight on me, I'm the GM or whatever, and people are watching me, but you can. They're going to wait for you, whatever you have to say. It's fine if you take some time to think through what you're about to say before you do it, and oftentimes that can have a really good effect. As does like just I mean these are sort of public speaking techniques too, but if you bring your voice down a little bit, or storytelling techniques, so you bring your voice down a little bit, everyone leans in, and you don't have to hit them with a boo afterwards. You can just do that. And then the other bit is from it's probably the best bit of advice, and it's so simple. It's from Vincent's two-player game, Murderous Ghosts. That one is just the person playing the ghost has no. You're not told to make anything scary for anyone else but yourself, and I think that's kind of important. Like it's hard to guess what's going to be scary for other people, but as long as you can you can scare yourself, you're going to greatly increase the odds of that happening.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I don't have too much to add to that. Like it doesn't take a lot to bring people in. Like sometimes just adding a concrete detail, or like I mentioned before, sensory detail, like the way something smells, or or sounds can add a lot to that atmosphere you're trying to create. And so can just kind of what Epi was talking about earlier about the contrasts. Sometimes that is part of what horror is, the unexpected, where like this sweet little girl says something really creepy, or even the horrible monstrous person says something really gentle and sweet. Just kind of putting people back and like, I don't know what to expect anymore. Kind of helps create that atmosphere.
And give things human faces. It's always creepy when something has a human face.
Yes.
The next question we have is, do you think that heavy rules reliance takes away from the horror element?
It's kind of a cop-out to say it depends on the rules, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, okay, so horror can mean a lot of different things. You can, when you're, I mean, this is sort of the inherent problem of bringing 3 to 4 or 5 or 6 friends to the table, and you say we're going to play a blah 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 kind of game. You're going to have a different opinion of what each of those means for every person that's sitting at the table. And like horror is really susceptible to that, I feel like, because a lot of times you tell one crowd that we're going to play a horror game, and all they really want is for there to be monsters involved. But you can easily play, a game with everyone being werewolves, where nothing about it is remotely scary, and it would still feel to a lot of people to fall within what they would expect if you said we're going to play a horror game. So I think the mechanics also fall along those lines a little bit. Like you, so I think it's more about what the expectations are. But also I think mechanics can do a lot of good towards pushing us in ways that we wouldn't normally go. I mean, part of horror is that it's repulsive in some way, right? So you have a game that says, all right, well, when this happens, you have to do this repulsive thing. And I don't mean like, I'm actually thinking specifically of Monster Hearts here, where I guess because I got werewolves on the mind here, and I played a werewolf in the game, and the werewolf is, or at least my character was this rebel who was like strong and can handle a whole bunch of things and blah blah blah. But when he became his worst self, he couldn't stop doing that until he hurt somebody he loved, right? And I'm not going to voluntarily hurt someone I love. It's great that the rules say that has to happen, right? Like that this is the kind of story we're going to tell. Even if you say in the beginning, yeah, we'll do it that way, it's good to have rules to nudge you in that direction. In the same way that if you have rules that take characters out of the game, you can do that without feeling entirely responsible for it, which I think is a big problem. Like if I'm running a slasher game, and then the rules say this person dies here, that's great. Then I don't have to be the person that says you died here. The rules did that for me. And so we can make that happen, and there's no wiggle room for me to go, well, no, or whatever. So I think, yeah, they could definitely help if they're pointing in the right direction.
Yeah, that's a good answer. There's different ways you can approach that kind of storytelling too, where you could have a completely dice-free game where you're sitting around a campfire and trying to scare each other by, I don't know, riffing off of each other's last bit and kind of building a story that way. Like that's something we've been doing as people for, I don't know, probably the beginning of time maybe. Um, uh, but I would say if I'm dealing with a system that has a lot going on, it's going to be hard to get into any particular emotion deeply. But if it's a system that I'm fairly comfortable with, or it's something that allows for things to come to a head, where there's this breathless moment, like Burning Wheel is a fairly complex system compared to a lot of indie games, but some of those moments where everybody's waiting on a single dice roll have reached levels of tension and horror more than like any other game I've played, where you're just kind of like you're expecting something or hoping something really good happens, and like you roll and they're all failures, and like, oh no, like it's terrible. And that's, that's bringing the mechanics in, and that's introducing this twist that's unexpected and terrible sometimes. So yeah, it can harm a game. Some mechanic or some games can get in the way, I guess, of what you're trying to do. But often I find it can really add to the tension.
Very cool. The last question I'm going to pull, the last one we got before we jump back to other stuff, is uh, Tara here says, I know a lot of gaming groups have some kind of afters or cool down time to reflect. Is there anything extra that you would do after a horror game? I think she's referring to like aftercare kind of things.
Yeah. Well, that's I'm probably not the best to answer that question. I really like the whole. I really like to scare myself, so I like to drag it out as long as I can afterwards, and I will. Like when I watch horror movies at home, I wait till there's nobody home and there's not going to be anybody home, and I wait till late at night, and then I watch them, and then I'm walking around in my house in the dark, listening to all the noises I never heard before, wondering, am I going to get to sleep tonight? Is this the smartest thing I've done in my life? And that may not be what you're looking for in aftercare. So I don't know if I can help answer this question.
I don't know. I find it more of a thing in LARP settings or games that tend to be much more immersive. Like a lot of tabletop games kind of go in and out of immersion, so you get a little bit of pullback and jumping back in. I I don't have like a set way that I do things. Some games, LARPs especially, will have like a defined debriefing period, which makes it easy to just kind of include that into the space. I try to talk to people after the game, if that's what they want to do, and if it seems like they were having a hard time, or they were just really sitting with something and wanted to talk about it, then I would encourage talking about it. But I'm probably also not the best person to be answering this question.
Okay.
Because I like this stuff too.
As the coward of the group,
there we go.
I will offer up what I would suggest in this instance. If you're running a game at a con, I would say open up the floor at the end of the game and say, I will be at the bar or at a coffee shop or in the lobby at this point in time if you want to talk and kind of deal with the crap we talked about in game. Because there are horror games that address stuff like child endangerment, kids getting killed. There are sexual implications in a lot of horror. I'm not saying that there are necessarily in the games you guys run, but I've seen it. And the tropes are really heavy from horror films where, we find what scares people most because it threatens their happiness. And we kind of sometimes need to back off of that a bit. So it might be good to arrange a time at a con where people who are in your games can come and talk to you and debrief. I wouldn't necessarily do it immediately after the game because that's hard to do at a con. But opening up your space and being available, I think, is really important. because sometimes games are really tough for people. As far as home games, you should have the time most of the time to talk with your players. If you don't, then maybe you need to reevaluate what you're spending your time on, in my opinion, because most of the time the people you're gaming with at home games are your friends. And if you're going to scare the shit out of them, then you might want to be able to back them up whenever they're scared. So take some time out, be available to talk to, and most of all, I think the biggest thing is if you know what scares your friends, or you know what's going to scare the players, make sure you know what's going to help them afterwards. So
That's a good answer.
thank you. I thought about it really hard. I have we still have 15 minutes, so I have a couple more quick questions. The biggest one that I have is what kind of mechanics do you think take horror games to the next level? Like increase the feel, like really intensify it? Like not just your own games, but other games you've played. What really makes it feel intense for you?
Well, there's this great one called Dread.
Oh, God.
I was waiting for it.
Right. No, but I mean, if we've talked about it a little bit, but it's great because it brings the tension into the mechanics quite literally. So, as it uses if someone who is actually unfamiliar with Dread, it uses a Jenga tower, and you pull from it as things come up, and you have to do challenging things. So you're literally playing Jenga while you're playing this game, and of course, as the tower gets more fragile, it kind of represents your life or the group, what's happening, and it creates literal tension because you're afraid that tower is going to fall at any time, and then if you do, you're dead. So it's kind of a hard mechanic to top for for actual tension, and in the mechanic like that.
I actually had a game of Dread where we doubled the height of the tower before it fell, and
Wow.
holding my breath, holding my phone, filming it because it's so much tension. And it's a great mechanic for horror, definitely.
I'm not going to talk about Dread. I actually the one game that made me really lose my horror cred. I mentioned earlier was Murderous Ghosts. Vincent Baker. It's a game that it comes with 2 booklets. You play a urban spelunker. You're a person who's one person plays an urban spelunker who's going into an abandoned building, doing something illegal, not there for illegal purposes. Well, yes, there for illegal purposes, but the illegal purposes are just to explore it. You're just curious about what's going on in this abandoned building. And then the other player plays a ghost who tries to murder them. And it's such a simple premise, but it's a 2-player game. And I think I sat down with Emily Care-Boss, who's also my wife, and she played the Murderous Ghost, and I played the Spelunker. And that game has a release valve on it, where if it gets too scary for you, you turn to a page, or at least this version. I'm pretty sure this is still in the final version, but this was when he was early playtesting. You turn to a page, and it says, "Oh, it was all just a scary dream. You're good," and that was it. And I pulled that release lever playing that game, and I spent some time afterwards trying to think what was it, and there's a couple things. Number one, the advice that I mentioned before that's brilliant, where you just tell someone to just think of something that scares yourself. Don't worry about the other person. Make that happen. But then it was also, I think, the intimacy of playing the game with someone that I knew so well, and knowing that they're doing the thing that's scaring them. It really it really hit home. I was like, I'm out. I'm done. Like, this is, you did it. Congratulations. I'm sickening. And not that I'm out from ever playing that game again. It was just that particular session was so, and I think that's great. But that was definitely one of the ones where I was they hit me good. I got a nice hit out of it. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like other ones that are really.
If I can offer an anecdote,
Yeah.
um, I actually played Black Stars Rise
Oh.
at we call them Nunchcons. They're run by our friend Jeff here in Pittsburgh. They're like home cons. And Strash was running it. I will butcher his last name if I say it, but he's Strash, and pretty much everybody knows him. But he was running it, and Strash and I know each other pretty well. And I think having somebody run a horror game for you that knows you well is actually really nice if you want to be scared.
Right.
Because Black Stars Rise is really rule simple. I think it's world inspired, but it's very removed from it. And a lot of it is you have these little playbooks that are like your characters' backgrounds. But because it had so few mechanics and Strash knew me so well, he just managed to hit every single little note for me. And we're in an attic basically in the middle of the night. It's like 4 a.m, and it's dark, and the house is creaking, and Strash is like speaking in his low voice, and it scared the hell out of me. Like, I played the whole way through, but the whole time I was like holding my breath, waiting for something bad to happen, because like that suspense, really, really made it scary for me. So I think that mechanics are important, but executing them well is probably more important than anything else.
Yeah, I was going to say beyond what we mentioned, like just rolling dice or whatever the mechanic can be its own super tense thing. If you kind of have this lead up to it where it's a really important role. This isn't just about can you like bash down the door. Like the stakes are really high here. And if you can kind of draw everyone's attention to that and build up to it right before you roll, it's this great moment of horror right there.
I just played in a Dungeon Crawl Classics game where my friend Kate. This is in this game in Dungeon Crawl Classic. When you start off in the game, everyone plays a number of characters that you expect most of them to die, and then the survivors go on to be D&D style heroes, sort of. But she was, by the end of the session, we were all down to our last characters or whatever, which already raises the tension or whatever. And the scenario itself was kind of a horror scenario. There was a lot of ghost things going on. And every time she rolled near the end, she would hold the dice out with her eyes closed and just, like as if it was the most painful thing in the world, and then would drop it and wouldn't even look, would just wait to hear our reaction to what happened. And that was great. That little bit of theater that the player did absolutely brought home that moment of terror. And we were like all of us on the edge of each of those rolls because we were like down to our last people. And that's fun. I mean, like, and that's another thing too. Like, I think a lot of times when I talk about horror in games, because of dread, I go to having a game that uses that tension and does like kind of a through line, holds that tension throughout the game. But that's not the only thing that can happen in a horror game. Like there's like horror games can do things that are just disturbing that stick with you in good ways or perhaps bad ways. But like it doesn't always have to be about maintaining that tension. It can just be about remembering, oh God, that was really creepy. That thing that happened there. or that it was really creepy that that came out of our friend's mouth, that they said that, like that. That could be a lot of fun too.
Very cool. Um, I think I want to cover one last thing, and then we'll probably wrap up. I wanted to ask what your favorite horror trope is, and how you bring that to games.
Hmm.
That's a good one. Hmm.
A challenge.
Yes.
Yes.
Challenge.
Well, I don't know if this is a trope or not, um, but I love uh, I, I I love the defiant nature of, like, in a lot of horror fiction, uh, the the protagonist just keeps, especially the movies, right? Like the protagonist just gets beaten up, and in the beginning you aren't even sure which one's going to be the the survivor or whatever, and they just go through all of this stuff until they reach this really defiant moment. Um, like, no, this is not going to happen anymore. And I like it when games allow that to happen. They don't necessarily say you're going to succeed at it, but they let you put it all on the line, or sacrifice big, or do something to really stand up to the horror that's been uh, attacking you or hounding you this whole time. That's something that I really enjoy.
Yeah, that's a good one. Um, yeah, it's funny. I usually think in terms of like avoiding tropes. But I think probably one of the things that I enjoy the most is the idea of am I becoming the monster?
Yeah.
Um, and it's one of the things I love about Monster Hearts, where like when you're going darkest self, you're suddenly in the position of doing the awful things. Uh, and I mean, you get that some with games about like with Cthulhu games about going into kind of insanity, but I think I like less insanity and more just being in the position of having to do or having done terrible things, and then like how do you process that? Um, it's definitely something that I've brought into the world, like where there's this idea that you could be the greatest threat to the ship. Um, outside of whatever disaster is happening, how you process that might actually do more damage than the initial problem.
Um, I would say like it's kind of a difficult trope for me, but the like it's all in your head kind of thing. Um, I have bipolar and I've had psychotic symptoms, so I've had like hallucinations and stuff in the past. So whenever I played Black Stars Rise, one of the things that they have in the game are these cards that are like they call them breaks or something, where they would have like a psychological impact on you because it's kind of Cthulhu inspired. And you like one of the cards I picked up, and it was like the one that my character was influenced by was the Shadow Man, and it's this guy that lurks in the corner of your vision, and he's following you the whole time, and you don't know if it's real or not real. And it was very relevant to like my past experiences with psychotic symptoms, so it was super scary for me, but it was still a game, so like I could experience that fear in a controlled way. And I thought that was really cool because sometimes the things that scare us most are easiest to experience whenever we know we can walk away.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's like for me, like it's all in your head is like a really, really scary thing. But I think the best way to experience that in game is finding the thing that truly scares you and then having the ability to like put your flag up and say, I'm done.
Yeah.
This scared me too much. So yeah, I think that's probably my favorite thing is that, it's all in your head. It was all just a dream kind of thing because it sticks with you pretty well.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Did the two of you have anything else you wanted to comment on before we close up? Because we have 2 minutes left, so I figured I would give you some time to, give any of your core tips on games, mechanics, and stuff like that.
I'm still mulling over the trope question in my head, honestly.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like, I know that there are tropes that I fall back on if I just can't think of anything. Because I mean, it's easy to grab for something, like when something innocent turns out to be not innocent at all, or that kind of stuff. But I mean, it's a good question, so I just keep thinking about it. I'm like, what are good ones to rely on?
I'm glad I gave you some inspiration with that.
Yeah, I'm thinking about tropes also. I mean, horror is a really broad term, and there's so many interesting directions you can take it. Because what terrifies me is going to be different from what terrifies you. What terrifies our generation is different than what terrified us like a generation ago, or what the next generation will be afraid of. And it's really interesting exploring the different faces of horror and what it teases out. It's just endlessly interesting to me.
I think I just remembered one of my favorites is it's the thing that like Romero does a lot, where you have like in Night of the Living Dead, or I don't want to spoil anything here, but like where you have people locked in a situation that they obviously are well outside their realm of normal experience, so they kind of find out who they are or whatever, and then the government, I shouldn't just say government, the authority structures built to protect you are either don't care about you whatsoever or are utterly incompetent. And actually that second one is my favorite of all of them, like, because it's so outside their realm of experience that they don't. And I think that The Crazies, which originally was a Romero film, got remade. I don't remember who remade it. Was really interesting to watch. The difference between the original and the second, because the Romero one, you watch and you can see how the authority is trying to solve the situation. You can see where it has all the pieces to the puzzle, but it's designed not to ever put those pieces together, and so it just falls apart. Like it's very, it's through sort of systemic incompetence. Whereas, and the authority in this case is the military. And in the remake, which came out within the past 10 years or so, the military is super ruthlessly efficient, and that's the problem, is that they're going to wipe out you along with everything else. And it's interesting to see the difference between the two, what scares the two audiences after 30 years of, differences between the two films. I don't know if it's actually 30 years, so don't quote me on that. I don't remember when the first. You can look it up. You can do the math yourself.
Awesome. Do you have anything else, Rachel?
I think that's it. I could talk about this all night.
Awesome. Well, we will call it a night and leave everyone here with their thoughts of scary things for the rest of the night. Thank you both for being a part of the panel, and I look forward to seeing what more comes from the two of you in the realm of horror in the future. All right, have a good night.
Thanks.
You too.